Filit, it is here. Of course, the beginning of the World Cup yesterday in Qatar in the Persian Gulf. And it raises a lot of questions because beyond the glitz and glamour that you saw in the opening ceremony in the glittering new stadia, what is life like behind the scenes? We're joined now by our colleague from Eyewitness News, Jane Dutton. She, of course, a well-known TV anchor in her own right, both here in South Africa and indeed for Al Jazeera all those years ago. Jane, a very good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning. There's a lot of controversy around this World Cup. Firstly, I imagine even the awarding of this tournament to Qatar.
Well, very good morning to you. I was just listening to you talking about Persian Gulf. I mean, even that is under dispute. They say Arabian Gulf. So I think it's an indication of how many factors and how many different elements are constantly at play in that region. The sort of, the ongoing political and human rights issues. I mean, it was a fantastic place to live in. Al Jazeera was extraordinary to work for. It was very different to CNN and BBC where I'd been before. But I think what this really exposes is the sort of levels of hypocrisy when something like this is firstly awarded. I mean, we've just seen COP at Egypt and, talking about human rights abuses. But it was I was working the day it was awarded to Qatar, and we were all shocked and extremely pleased and surprised. And we also wondered how many of those brown paper envelopes were handed around.
Indeed. I mean, that's why I said there are so many issues that, sort of come together when it comes to questions around Qatar hosting this. Not least, of course, is the reporting of not just human rights abuses. Let's talk, for example, about the issue of the migrant laborers. According to The Guardian in the UK, 6,500 migrant laborers from countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all reported to have died in the construction of not only the stadia, but in really getting the country ready to host the spectacle.
Yeah, it is terrible. And people talk about Qatar being built on the back of slavery. I actually did a documentary called The Workers' Cup, and we interviewed many workers who came from Africa, and they were promised a job working as a professional footballer in Qatar, be part of one of the teams there. And then they'd get to Qatar, and of course, that didn't happen. They ended up becoming these migrant laborers. They'd have their passport taken away from them. I know this has changed now, the labor laws have been changing, but you can't leave a job without a letter letting you go. So that's why they call it modern day slavery. So a lot of workers get there, are lured there under false pretenses. The heat is mind blowing. I mean, I was there for 13 years and I never got used to it. 100% humidity, goes up into the high 40s, and many of those building sites, as you can imagine, there's no AC or anything like that. And the hours are draconian. I mean, a friend of mine worked on the Qatar World Cup and she was head of communications. And she was tutoring the former Sheikha's daughter, Sheikha Maasa, I love that name, and she was tutoring her on media training and how to deal with issues that are going to come up during the World Cup. And when she started talking about the workers, Sheikha Maasa said, why do I need to know about them? Why do I have to give them answers? This is what was reportedly told to my friend. So you get the feeling that the workers and people of employment are not really seen. Yeah. And it's a big issue. I mean, a lot of the Filipinos would be really badly treated. Some of them not getting any leave, not being paid. But the problem is there's so much money. So how do you ever stop this from happening?
Let's talk about the human rights issue, not only in terms of what you've just mentioned now as far as labor laws and workers. Article 281 of their penal code says that men and women who have sexual relations outside of marriage could face imprisonment. Of course, Human Rights Watch says ultimately what it really means is that often it's the women who are prosecuted for this crime, in inverted commas, with officials believing that if any woman knows the male offender, it's enough to prosecute her and not him. That's the kind of thing that's still a reality there?
I mean, even if a woman is not married and somehow has, been able to pull off being pregnant there, if you give birth in hospital without your husband being there, there are reports that the child would get taken away. So that's just another level, and that sort of hierarchical level of yeah. And I don't mean to make light of it, but I was just talking to my Al Jazeera friends a little bit earlier, a couple of days ago, when the beer debate was raging between Qatar and FIFA, and obviously Qatar won that one. And we said, how, this is so typically Qatar. We can imagine some old codger sitting in his majlis playing with his worry beads, having drunk his third double vodka and just, paid the rent boy to leave, going, oh my goodness, this is haram. It's totally unacceptable. And there's a high level of hypocrisy in that country. I mean, there are a lot of homosexual men there, a lot of homosexual gay activity happening in Qatar. But when people are in Qatar, the thing is that you have to behave. This is where you are conservative. You can get on that plane to London and whip off the hijab and behave sort of in a different manner that's not acceptable at all in Qatar. So I actually met a guy who was homosexual. He was this beefcake when I met him, and then I saw him about 6 months later, and he put on a lot of weight, and he was looking really scruffy and dressed really badly. And I said to him, "What happened to you?" He said, "No, I'm not gay anymore. I'm going to get married." And then I saw him again about a year later, and he was back to being beefcake and, prancing around and super proud with his boyfriend. And I said to him, "What happened?" And apparently his parents sent him for treatment to stop being gay. So I know that was certainly happening when I was being there. And you can imagine how traumatic that must be, pushing away something that you are, hiding something.
Right, we thought we'd get a little bit of colour in terms of what life might be like in Qatar. Jane Dutton, I appreciate your time this morning, just giving us a sense of what might be at stake here. I want to quote now from the former FIFA Secretary General, Jerome Valcke, who said in 2012, referring now to Brazil's hosting of the tournament, that alcoholic drinks are a part of the FIFA World Cup, so we're going to have them. Excuse me if I sound a bit arrogant, but that's something we won't negotiate. That was then, this is now. I'm seeing an SMS on the SMS line asking, what's a beefcake, KG? A beefcake cannot describe you or me. This is somebody who's on, who's probably at the gym 3 times a day. You know those muscular gym fit guys? That's what a beefcake is.
702.
The Big Interview
With Bongani Bingwa.
Right, we're continuing the conversation now about the World Cup, but perhaps away from the politics and to what is going to unfold on the pitch. I'm really pleased to tell you we've got Joe Maluleke, who is, of course, the football editor at Super Sport, who joins us now on the line. Joe, thank you very much for your time this morning. The spectacle, of course, has begun. What an opening ceremony yesterday, and what an opening game.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Bingwa Bongs and the 702 listeners. Yeah, what a spectacle. I mean, I've been saying, we can't wait. Let it start. Let's get the football going. And I think the Qatari really put up a great show in terms of the opening ceremony. Never mind the football, we'll talk about that. It was also great to see the old man, Morgan Freeman, participating there, and the message that he had to share with the world. But I think overall, the opening ceremony was fantastic, but obviously nothing compared to South Africa 2010.
Yeah. Look, the weather has been a hot topic, I imagine, really since the awarding of the tournament to Qatar. How much of a factor is that going to be, given that even though this is meant to be their cooler season, their cooler period, it's still bloomin' hot?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was talking to some of the analysts at SuperSport. I mean, ex-players. You've seen them on the World of Champions, and I mean, they make a point to say, yes, the World Cup is generally played in summer in Europe. If you come to think about it, yes, it is hot, but nothing compared to Qatar. Yes, Qatar, we know it is winter now. The stadiums are air-conditioned. And I was laughing yesterday when we did Maraba, the insert with Carol. You saw her hair was like, it was almost as if she was standing in front of a fan to get her to cool down. But yes, it is hot. But it's nothing that the players cannot deal with, and I don't think it's something that Qatar would make an excuse of to say, yeah, it was too hot yesterday. That's why we put up a terrible show as we did yesterday.
Only 8 stadia being used. It's the lowest number in a World Cup since Argentina in 1978. Does that make it a more interesting tournament, or is it not really a factor?
I think it does, Bongs. It makes it interesting in the sense that as a football fan, if you want you want a great World Cup experience, you can go watch all the games. Basically, it's like we can use Gauteng as an example. Can you imagine the World Cup being played in Gauteng? 1 minute you're in Rurepur, the next minute you're in Centurion, the next minute you're in Benoni. Watching all 3 games in one day. So for the fan, that's a great opportunity to watch as many games as they can without worrying about the distance between the match venues.
Right, we've got a cracking game today, of course. Senegal versus the Netherlands. Bafana are not in it. Do you have a team you've selected, Brajo?
Bafana were playing apparently yesterday. I checked on the World Cup channels. I'm thinking, what are these people doing? Yes, look, a big game today. Senegal, Netherlands. It's a big game to watch. Yes, Sadio Mane is not there, but I don't think that's going to be a factor in terms of affecting their performance. There are other star players in the Senegalese team. Edouard Mendy, a lot is going to be expected of him. Nevertheless, he's a goalkeeper, but a lot is going to be expected in terms of providing, the guidance, the leadership that is needed to get Senegal, going on a positive note. And I was just looking at the statistics. I mean, Senegal have never lost playing against European opposition in the group stages. Maybe that's something positive for them. Although Netherlands, on the other hand, if you look at them, their record is also, they've got quite an impeccable record. I mean, their last 8 opening matches, they've never lost. They won 6 and then they've drawn 2.
All right, let me ask you, for the tournament, yes.
Yeah. For the tournament.
Answered like a politician. Joe Maluleka, I interview politicians for a living. Talk to me. The team you're backing at this World Cup.
According to the clever people, they're saying Argentina are going to win the World Cup. And I think experience taught me. In 2018, they said France are going to win the World Cup, and that's what happened. So I'm not going to bet against them. Although, I'd like to see Brazil do well. At the World Cup, I'd like to see Portugal do well. Portugal for Ronaldo. Ronaldo, of course, he's got a lot of anger in terms of not having played for
Man United. Yeah,
he needs he needs a contract in January, so he's gonna, leave everything on that football pitch. So for me, Brazil, but I think Argentina might end up winning it.
I think the Argentina voices are just Messi fans in the closet. We'll keep it. We'll leave it at that. Joe Maluleke, Supersport.com football editor, there on the line. Are you excited about the World Cup? Is there a team you are backing since Bafana is not in it? I mentioned Senegal and the Netherlands, but of course there's also going to be the England versus Iran game. That should be a cracker, not only for the football, but for the politics as well.
Current events, developing stories,
Tough questions.
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.